Unity caused a firestorm in the community with their pricing changes that were to go into effect on January 1st of this coming year. Now, if you haven't seen a video I did on that, check the previous video about Unity and you'll see that. Now, almost the entire community pushed back against those changes. So Unity spent some time to listen to the community's complaints and they adjusted their pricing to make things better. But were those changes enough? That's what we'll discuss in this video. In case you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey and I make learning C# easier. This channel has hundreds of free videos to help you become a great C# developer. Plus, I offer more free C# resources, a podcast, and paid courses on my website at iamtimcorey.com. So let's start with a very, very brief recap. What happened? Well, on September 12th, 2023, Unity announced that their initial pricing changes, which were pretty catastrophic. The summary basically is that as a game developer, you would not know how much you would have to pay up front. You wouldn't be able to plan for, okay, this percentage or that percentage. You just wouldn't know. On September 22nd, 10 days later, Unity announced their updated pricing changes. Okay, so they kind of changed some things. Let's look at what's in this new plan. So first of all, for Unity Personal, it's free to use, which it was before, but it's free to use still. They limit the amount of money you can make per year to $200,000. That means if you're using Unity Personal and you make more than $200,000, you're going to have to upgrade to Unity Pro, okay? But only at the $200,000 per year cap, all right? And that's up from $100,000, which is what it used to be. They also said you can now remove the Unity splash screen starting in the 2023 LTS, which, by the way, the 2023 LTS comes out in 2024. So the long-term support version of Unity always comes out. It's 2023 comes out in 2024. 2022 is out now for 2023. So these pricing changes only apply to the new version of Unity, which comes out in 2024. All right. So you can also, one of the things that has come up that's been a question mark is you can use Unity offline for 30 days at a time. So they have a new login system that will go into effect in November that will require you to be online to log into the Unity system, and it's going to renew your your Unity license every 30 days. This is just like what Visual Studio does, just to be clear. So even Visual Studio Community Edition has to be online it might be in 30 days, I'm not sure. But in a certain period of time, the login expires and it renews when you connect online. So that's a pretty common thing. Now, I do want to point one quick thing out. We'll talk about it again, but that $200,000 annual revenue, you're going to ask the question, well, how does Unity know how much I've made? And the answer is, just like before, they don't. This is a self-reported limit. So what they're saying is you have to make $200,000 or less per year in order to use Unity Personal. If you make more than that, it's on an honor system. You need to upgrade to Unity Pro. There is not a tracking system in place. Now, if they were to see that you have $1 million game and they were to check your license and you're still on Unity Personal, yeah, they might bring that up. But this is on an honor system for reporting, just like it was last year. Okay, so what's Unity Pro? Well, Unity Pro currently is $2,000-ish, and they're saying there will be a price increase next year, which is in line with the previous price increases. So there will be a slight price change. They have not announced that yet, what that will be. They just announced there will be a small change in that, but it won't be a radical change. So currently it's about $2,000. Now, when you have Unity Pro, there's no runtime fee until you meet the $1 million annual income and 1 million engagements. So you have to hit both before they start charging you any runtime fee. So if you make up to $1 million per year, you only pay the $2,000 for Unity Pro or whatever the cost is at that point. Now, the engagements, that's one of those things they've renamed it to engagements. They did say downloads, and that was problematic in how they said things. What they mean by engagements, we'll talk more about this in a minute, but what they mean by engagements is they can't say sales. So they can't say once you sell to 1 million people, because what if your game is a free-to-play game? Well, you don't sell to anybody, but your game still makes money. So what they're saying is if you sell 1 million copies, or if you have 1 million new users sign up for your free-to-play game, either way that would count as an engagement. That's also self-reported. Okay, now if you break that threshold, the runtime fee is either based upon your engagements, as in that number above 1 million, or 2.5% of your gross revenue. And you get to choose which to report, or if you report both, they will always charge you the lesser amount. So let's just say you had a big spike of people purchasing your game, but there's not a ton of engagements, okay? Not comparatively. Well, it might be easier to say engagements because that number is less and you might pay, less money compared to 2.5% of your gross. Or the opposite may be true. So you get to choose, but either way, the maximum you will pay is 2.5% of your gross. That's the maximum you would pay after that $1 million and 1 million engagements. All right. So that's the lesser of the two is what you'd pay. And again, that's self-reported. And that is self-reported based upon numbers you already have. So Unity is saying you're not going to have to install any spyware. You're not going to have to do anything different than you're already doing. You'll take the dashboard information you already have from your stores and use that for self-reporting. And if there's an edge case that's just not covered, you don't have that data, you don't report it. It's an estimate. You get to estimate based upon what you think is accurate based upon the numbers you're given from your stores. So it's all on you. There is no Unity side tracking for this. And finally, a few more pieces of information. First of all changes are going to be for the new versions of Unity only. So when these changes do not apply to existing games, we had that probably for the last pricing where it was kind of retroactive, where even though it didn't apply to 2022's income, when your game was in 2024, your game would be charged even though you deployed it under, say, a 2022 LTS. That is no longer the case. Now, if you deploy your game with the 2023 LTS, which is the 2024 version, and it's confusing, but if you deploy it with that version, these prices will apply. If you're still on an older version of the LTS, it will not apply. And that will be true going forward too. So if Unity decides down the road to, let's say, change to 3.5% instead of 2.5%, they're saying, they're going to put it in legal terms, in legal contract, they're saying that will only apply to a future LTS version, not to previous LTS versions. And again, they're saying they're putting that into a legal binding document that codifies these restrictions on themselves. So you'll be able to keep the terms of the version you deployed at for as long as you use that version. Now, if you deployed on a 2022 LTS version, but then you upgrade that project to your 2023 LTS, well, then it does apply going forward. Not backwards, but forward. All right? So just note that if you update or if you don't, well, that's kind of up to you. But if you update, you may have your game applied to the new pricing policies, if there are new pricing policies compared to what you deployed at. Okay, so let's talk about the possible scenarios. I raised these possible scenarios last time. I want to come back to those same scenarios and talk about them again. So this, the ethical free-to-play game where you have $10 to unlock the rest of the game, 1 million people download it, and 2% of people upgrade. Now, that means you've made $200,000 before fees. On the old plan, you would have owed $160,000 for this if you used Unity Personal. Under the new plan, you owe nothing, $0 to Unity. So it's $200,000. That's, you have hit the threshold. You have not gone over it. Now, of course, you go $200,001. Well, then you have to upgrade to Unity Pro, which would be $2,000, which would be 1% of your income so far. But you still then wouldn't owe anything more until $1 million. So for right now, you're fine. You don't have to owe Unity anything. Next scenario we talked about was a mobile game where it's $1 to purchase the game, 500,000 people purchase it, and half the people upgrade their phones, which would mean a reinstall. Okay, now you've made $350,000 after the store fees. What would you owe Unity? Well, you would owe Unity $2,000 for Unity Pro. That's it. Under the old plan, you'd owe $110,000 at least. So under this plan, you just owe the $2,000. That's it. So much, much, much better plan when it comes to the edge cases, especially. This has taken care of a lot of these problems. So the Unity had, taken a step back, and they ended up talking to creators. Again, they talked to me before. They talked to developers before. They talked to people in the industry before, their insiders before, their customers before. They talked to these people before. They just didn't listen to them. This time, they actually listened, heard the problems, heard the suggestions, and basically implemented what seems like all the suggestions, or almost all the suggestions, from the community, at least the ones that were the general consensus suggestions. Okay, so there was a fireside chat. Here's some notes I have from that. First of all, one of the things that the head of the Unity division said was that Unity must have a sustainable business, and I fully agree. When your software product does not have a way to be sustainable, does not have an income source that allows it to hire people, give people raises, handle the business, when those things aren't in place, well, then your software is in danger. And we've seen that over and over and over again. People say, no, not this time, not this time, not this time. Yes, this time. So they said, you know what? The reason why we made those changes is because Unity needs to have a sustainable business. And I fully agree they have to have a sustainable business. Now, they made the wrong choices, but they did make choices because of that need for sustainability. And so, yes, changes had to be made, but they need to make different changes to make them a good change, okay? And so that I think they've made those good changes, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. There's no legal documents yet. So one of the things that they talked about was, there's nothing in legalese yet. There's nothing in writing in a contract we can see, but that's because they were making an announcement on September 12th, and they made an announcement on September 22nd. They had their lawyers working on finalizing the legal documentation before January 1st. It's a little bit last minute feeling. They're kind of cut it close here in order to have something new for January 1st, but that's what they're working on, is those documents. So there still is stuff kind of pending on this situation. Now, we talked before, but they're saying engagements now instead of sales, because that way they can account for things like free-to-play games, which don't have sales but still make money. And by sale, I mean when you actually get the game. So instead of saying getting the game, they're saying engagement, which is a much cleaner way of saying that. Okay. Number 4, the fourth bullet point here, the terms are going to be locked legally. At least that's what they're saying at this point. Again, back to point 2, we have not seen legal documents yet. They are coming. So hopefully when they come, they will actually be locked legally. If not, I think that would be a problem in the community. I think it would, they're saying they will be. So at this point, we have to just believe them because, or wait and see. That's kind of our only 2 options. And then again, numbers will be self-reported. There is no Unity tracking system. So this is one of the questions that everyone had is Unity keeps saying that they have a number. They know the numbers. And so when they said, engagements, that's their new word for it, but when they said downloads, they kept saying they would know and they'd be able to bill people appropriately, which they can't. They just can't. But the question was, how are you tracking that? And the answer, according to them, is there isn't a tracking system. They just have some metrics they thought would be good estimates, which that doesn't work. But that's why the numbers we self-reported is because they don't have a tracking system in place. They said that your app does not send data, your game does not send data back. The Unity runtime does not send data back about your game. They're saying only if you have the specifically turned on some logging will it even report anything back. So they're saying that everything has to be self-reported because of the fact they don't have a tracking system in place. So that's the notes from that Fireside Chat they did on YouTube, and you can go see the actual Unity Fireside Chat if you want to see it. It wasn't the greatest Fireside Chat. I think there was some things that were kind of left off the table or not discussed or not answered in a great way. So let's talk about my thoughts from this chat. The first one being they did not address any changes to Unity leadership. So there was some really bad choices made. And they have said, the first thing they said was, I'm sorry. We're sorry. We did not do what we should have done. They took ownership of that. But they didn't address any changes because of this, as far as to the leadership structure. They did say they're going to change how they do things, but this is a pretty egregious thing to do. This was pretty poorly done and really was not a good thing. And their CEO did not get in the Fireside Chat. Their board did not get in the Fireside Chat. It was just the head of the Unity division that got on the Fireside Chat. And so, it kind of felt like, there was not really a great, here's what we're going to do to change, and here's how we're going to change our structure to, cut out people who make decisions like this. So that's one thing they didn't change. Now, do they have to? No, they don't have to change their leadership structure at all. If they think they can effectively make better decisions, they learn from this and grow from this. Everybody makes mistakes. I don't think this was one of those times when you just made a mistake. I think it's kind of bigger than that. But you know what? If you decide that that's what's best, that's fine. It does make it a little harder to trust, though, when the same people who made that bad decision are still at the company. So that's something that it makes trust harder, but definitely can be something they can move forward with. So it's still up to them how they deal with things, but they didn't address any kind of changes to the leadership. Number 2, this is something that I came away with, which is that financial stability is a bit of a concern for me. When they said they made these changes, the reason they said they made the initial changes is because Unity has to be financially viable. They need to have a plan for how to make enough money to sustain it. That makes total sense. They wanted these changes to be retroactive, which would have brought on board a lot of the big games that don't pay Unity hardly anything. Well, with these new changes, not only do those new big games don't have to get on board with anything. They don't have to do anything because they're deployed under an older LTS. Therefore, these changes do not apply to them if they don't want to. Which why would you want to be charged We don't have to be. But also, there's basically very little to no income coming in until mid to late 2024 from these changes. And if Unity really did need to make money and need to make it in a fast enough fashion, they were wanting to start January 1st of 2024, well, that means that they have just reduced how much money they're going to make and pushed off when they're going to make that money. That's a bit of a concern as to, is this still enough money for them? And is it coming early enough, or are they going to have other problems? If it's a big enough company, which it's fairly good size, if it's a big enough company, they can absorb some losses and, hold out for that income. That might be okay. But who knows? It's one of those things that is a bit of a concern for me, is just that they made changes in order to add financial stability. And then they made more changes. They kind of backed some changes out, and they made some different changes, which still adds financial stability eventually, but not nearly as much. And it's not nearly as soon. So that's still a concern. One of the things they also did not address is, how did Unity plan on tracking these things before? That's something that, they did not address. They said, we're going to do self-reporting. But that's not what they were originally planning. Originally, they said, we've got an algorithm, it's black box, but you can trust us. We're going to estimate for you. What is that, and how is that possible? Because that does exist, because at least they said it existed. And if it exists now, then, why, how does that work? Because that's a little concerning still, is that even if they now say, you're self-reporting now, yes, but you still have that same system, I'm assuming. So how does that work? So that's a question they did not answer. One of the things that can be good and can be bad is that Unity is now incentivized to make new versions better to increase revenue. Because if the only way they can make more money, so if they're locked in at 2.5%, and let's just call it 2.5%. If they're locked in at 2.5% of gross, well, what if they want to go to 3%? Well, they can't without a new LTS version to put that into. Well, how would you get people to move? Because if they're at 2.5%, why would they ever go to 3%? Well, you have to provide enough value for people to voluntarily leave the older version at 2.5% and go to the new version. That means they have to provide more value in their long-term support version that has the price increase. They have to provide even more value in the product to entice you to come over. So instead of being just pay us more, now they are saying, they're going to have to say, hey, here's some cool new features. Is that worth 0.5%? And then we get to decide as game developers, do we want to take on that new cost or not? So I think that's good. It could be bad. I've seen, some people a little concerned there, because there is the possibility, however small, that they could say, well, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to fix any bad bugs. But they are LTS versions. So they're kind of contractually obligated to fix bad bugs or things that are, a serious problem. So maybe it's just, broken things that, are a pain, but not really show stopping, where they could add it in the new version. Who knows? But either way, they're going to fix stuff in order to incentivize you to go to the new version. So it's mostly good, I think, that they're incentivized now in a positive way to encourage users to go to the new version by giving them new features or new benefits in some way. So that's where we're at with my thoughts here. let's talk more about, or my thoughts from the Fireside Chat. Let's talk about my thoughts overall. I think the new deal is fair. I think it absolutely is fair. If you pay the 2.5% of gross, which is the maximum you'd ever pay, okay? So you're always going to pay, once you get to $1 million, you're always going to pay 2.5% of your gross or less. That is at the highest cost. That is half of what you'd pay with Unreal. Okay, so that's a fair deal. That's, yes, it's 2.5% more than you may have been paying before, but it definitely is a fair deal, and it's also only at $1 million and above. So that's great. And again, if you're at the 200,000 to 1 million range per year, well, then you just upgrade from the personal to the pro, and it's around $2,000, which once you're making $200,000, $2,000 shouldn't be a big deal. So that's not a big deal. You pay for what you use, right? So I think that's definitely fair. Trust is going to take some time to rebuild. Okay. And they talked about that. They talked about in the Fireside Chat, they talked about the fact that you can't rebuild trust with words. You have to rebuild trust with actions, and that takes time. So that's what they're going to do. That's what they're committed to doing. Again, those are words. We have to watch them do it, and that's going to take time. So it's going to be a while to rebuild that trust. The leadership is still a concern. The leadership hasn't changed. And they were concerned 6 months ago. They're still concerned now. They're more of a concern now because they have shown this desire to make some pretty bad changes. And they say they've learned from that. But again, trust takes time to rebuild. All right. Unity is still an excellent platform for making games. That hasn't changed. That was true 6 months ago. It's true now. It will be true 6 months from now. Unity is an excellent platform for making games. So as a comparison, I do think that if you're getting into game development, or you're thinking about game development, or you're in the early stages of game development, that you need to compare your big three options for engines. So we've talked a lot about Unity. So what are the options? Well, Unreal, it uses C++ and it has a 5% fee after $1 million. So now Unreal is the engine. Like it's massive. It has tons of features. And they subsidize it with their Fortnite income. But still, it's C++, not C#. So if you're a C# developer, it's going to be a change. And it's twice the fee of what what Unity is at this moment. Just so you're aware as well, kind of the background of all of this, Epic, which owns Unreal, just laid off 16% of its workforce, about 900 people, because all companies have to think through their cash flow. And there's two ways to improve cash flow. One is to make more money, like Unity is trying to do, and two is to lay off people, which is what Unreal is currently doing. So they are not in a much better financial position necessarily than Unity is. And then Godot is there too. Godot does use C#, although not fully. It's still a little bit rough. And I was very, very happy with the team from Godot and the people who work on it, especially the creator, who they're very open about Godot and about how, it's an option. It might not be the option for you. And that was awesome to hear. It's awesome to hear that they were open and honest about where they were at, what they were doing, and so on. They do have some funding. Okay, it is open source. So I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, open source is the way." Not really, because what you're doing is you're depending on the generosity of others in order to be a long-term strategy. And in my opinion, that's not a great long-term strategy. So they have to have a way to sustain it financially. And Godot does have funding. When they just started asking for funding in a different way, they had some Patreon, I believe, but they kind of switched over to a new way of funding Godot. And they switched over their people from their other funding sources over to this new system. They had about €25,000 a month of support. Now it's up over 50,000 euro a month of support. Now, I do not expect it to stay at 50,000 euro a month. I expect that to go down over time. It's just the nature of the beast where, people who were frustrated about this Unity situation have done the right thing and they have put money into the alternative to help make the alternative better. That's awesome. I really appreciate people who do that, not just use their words, but actually put their money where their mouth is and support something else, something what they want to see happen. But that's not a forever thing. And so, that's something that they need to think through. But right now, based upon if you had to hire a staff in order to build Godot, well, you could afford about 3 full-time developers in the US. If you're hiring US developers, of course, it's different in other parts of the world, but about 3 full-time developers, and that'd be it. No support staff, no management, nothing else at the 50,000 euro per month level. So that's not a lot of people. So, you're still relying on a lot of people donating their time, and a lot of people do. And that does work to an extent. But it's something to think about when you're thinking about building a business, which is what you're doing. You're building a game to sell. You're building a business. When you're building a business on top of a platform, you have to think through the long-term stability of it. And with Unity, you're building a long-term stability of a leadership that you don't necessarily trust. With Unreal, you're building on the stability of a company that's a little more expensive and still has some leadership issues, not necessarily as bad as Unity, but still has some issues. Or Godot, which has, kind of looks like better leadership, and it's open source, which has, a lot of benefits there, but doesn't have great funding yet. Even at 50,000 euros, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but even there, it's not necessarily a business level like Unreal or Unity is. So that's something you need to think through is which one of these options. None of them are a perfect option. None of them are the best option for all solutions. There's different options that are going to fit different situations, but those are your 3 options at this point. Okay, so that's kind of the wrapping up of my thoughts of this Unity situation, but there is one more question that came up in the last video on Unity and also this one. What about the Game Development Master Course? If you don't know, I am in the process of building a master course called the Game Development Master Course. It's based upon learning from the ground up, from knowing nothing, learning how to be a game developer with C# and Unity, doing it right. And we're going to learn all the foundational stuff. We're talking about game development theory, and we're talking about actually building in Unity and learning C# as well. The C# you'll need for game development, and doing that in a way it's not that's the right way to learn C# for Unity. And also it's at the same time preparing you for, well, if you want to be a regular C# developer too, we talk a lot about that, and kind of differences where there are differences. But we're building this game, and it's right now in the pre-order process of building this course. If you watched Thursday's video, the dev question episode on Crisis, you saw my outline for how to deal with Crisis. And my team and I walked through that system to identify what to do next with the Game Development Master Course. And here's what we decided. We decided that Unity is still the best choice for C# developers to learn game development. And it's still the best choice for game developers to learn C#. And enough safeguards will be in place to reasonably ensure that Unity is a good long-term solution for game development. So as such, we're going to push forward with the Game Development Master Course. In fact, a new module is going to be released later this week for that pre-order. Now, however, I want to be very clear here. Not everybody's going to be comfortable moving forward with learning Unity. In fact, I would not encourage everybody to blindly move forward. I want you to evaluate this and make the right decision for you. So that's why we're offering all students who are currently in the Game Development Master Course a full refund if they decide they want to leave. If you decide, you know what, I bought into this, I started down this process, but with this Unity situation, I'm just not sure. No problem. I totally understand. We'll give you a full refund. If you decide, 6 months down the road you want to come back, that's cool. At that point, hopefully, it will be fully published, and you can buy the full course. So it's up to you, but we want to make sure that we don't kind of lock anybody in against their will, for sure. You always want to do right by our students. We want to make sure that we make the best choice for you and what we teach you, and then that you are, led forward and feel comfortable in that. So I fully believe that Uni is a great choice still for a lot of developer situations, including people who want to learn game development who are C# developers, and for people who want to learn C# development who are game developers. So I think there's definitely still, it's the best choice for those situations. And so this course is still a great option for learning game development. So that's why we chose what we chose. Again, you can have a different choice. That's fine. And as such, we're going to honor that if you decide to back out. All right. So thanks for watching. I hope it's the last video I have to do about this whole Unity debacle. And going forward, when you see Unity, it'll be about, tutorials and how to do things instead of just, drama. But that's what the situation is currently. I think that things are moving in the right direction. And if anything if they were to back things out or something like that, we'd definitely talk about it at that point. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to have a good transition into this new LTS that I think that we can all support. All right. So thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.